Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business to help educate you on complex legal terms in an easy to understand manner, to help understand why you need to do certain things in your business from a legal point of view, and to help you develop a plan for the future. Our mission at Business Legal Lifecycle is to help empower all small to medium-sized businesses around the world to get access to legal advice so that they can help build their communities and make the world a better place. Did you know that any business owner is on average 7 months away from losing everything? That is the average time it takes from a successful business to fold when an aspect of their business is not set up correctly. Have you ever wanted to get legal advice but didn't understand what was going on? Do you feel like there is a divide between lawyers and their clients? Then this TV show is for you. It is all about empowering you and your business with the knowledge and tools to ensure that this doesn't happen to you. Business Legal Lifecycle TV delivers a twice-weekly show focusing on the legal aspects of your business. At lunchtime on Mondays, we present Fast Fix Monday, a quick 5 to 10 minute show that will give you some actionable steps to consider for the week for your business. And at lunchtime on Wednesdays, we present our in-depth show of between 30 minutes and an hour, where we go through complicated legal aspects of your business in a simple to understand, plain English manner. And whether that is through educational pieces or interviews with experts in their fields.
Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV. My name's Craig Mason, and I have with me, as always, Jeremy Stretton. Jeremy, how are you going? And today we're going to talk about debt recovery. So, Jeremy, did you want to explain what phase this fits into in the Business Legal Lifecycle?
Absolutely. Thanks, Craig. Well, so what I've done is, for people who are watching this on the Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, I've brought up a slide that shows the Business Legal Lifecycle and shows phase 3. If you're listening to the podcast, please feel free to have a look at our website, businesslegallifecycle.com.au, and you'll be able to find out a bit more about the Business Legal Lifecycle, or check us out on the Facebook page, and you can watch the live video, because we post all these and have them available through all those platforms, as I said, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and Twitter. So phase 3 is all about initial clients. So this is when you're actually starting your business and basically getting everything in order to engage with your clients. And the reason that we talk about debt recovery here is due to the fact that debt recovery is really important in this phase, because you've got to make sure that you start off right. So debt recovery is all about making sure that you're getting paid for the work that you do, because there's no point in running a business if you're not going to get paid for what you do. So that's why we put that in phase 3 initial clients. You would have heard earlier in the month we talked about initial clients. We talked about your ideal client. We talked about a few other topics, but this is really important in this phase because you need to make sure that you're paid. And the reason for that is that cash is king in a business. So in any business, it doesn't matter whether you're running a law firm, a building company, a shop front, whatever it is, you need to make sure that you're getting paid for the work that you're doing. And if you're not doing that, then you're going to really struggle to actually operate your business. So now there are different ideas about cash is king, and there's different ideas about when you should get paid. Personally, I prefer getting paid upfront before you do the work or before you provide the product. Now, the reason that that works is that you're getting paid when the person most wants your services or your product. When you don't have that in place, and you provide them with a product or you provide them with a service, then you ask to be paid, the motivation is really gone. So if you can be paid up front, and I know that in some industries that's tough, that's not the normal, that can cause problems legally speaking, but you do need to try and get paid up front as much as you can. If you don't, then you need to have a think about, well, how am I going to collect my debts? And so Craig's going to go through in a minute, going through a debt collection process that we recommend for our clients and that we use for our clients, because we've found that it's the best way to make sure that you get paid. So in that, this is really talking about today, and debt recovery is really talking today about the cash recovery side of things. But I just wanted to talk about the fact that if you got paid up front, then you'll find that you'll get your cash faster, and you'll be able to operate a better business. So if you can, get paid first, and make sure that you actually get paid for the work that you do. There's some great reading that you can do on this topic. In Rich Dad Poor Dad, if you haven't read that, you should pick up a copy of that and read that, because that talks about making sure you get paid. And there's also the Michael Witch book, Profit First. That's a really good book as well, that you should have a read of if you're not sure about this. The other thing to remember, that in getting paid up front, it's something that a lot of business owners find scary. That's fine, that's quite normal, but you really want to make sure that you've got some process in place, and that you have the conversations, because you will be surprised at how many clients actually do have no problem with paying up front. You know, we run a law firm. We require, for most things, money up front in our trust account. That means we can't get paid until the work's complete. There are legal reasons for that, as any lawyers who are watching this will know. But we can make sure that we get paid in a timely manner, and our clients are more than happy to pay us straight up front. And there was a lot of angst within our firm when we introduced that earlier in 2017, but it's actually turned out to be quite a good process. It means we get paid first. It means that we're not chasing payment from clients, and that they know that they're going to get their service provided to them in a really efficient and cost-effective way. So Craig, that's all I wanted to say on cash is king. Did you want to add anything onto that before we go into the debt collection process?
I don't think so. That covered everything. Yeah, let's go with the debt collection process and what it's all about.
Done. Yep.
All right. So, what is the debt collection process? So, as Jeremy was saying, if you're getting cash up front, then obviously you don't need to be collecting your debts. Or if you're cash over the counter business, then yeah, you're not going to have to worry about these sorts of things. But where you're providing goods on credit, for instance, or you're providing service and getting paid later on, then you really need an internal debt collection policy to ensure, obviously, that you get paid in a timely manner. So most businesses will have some form of term on their invoice. So it might be 7 days, 30 days, or 30 days from the end of the month that the goods are provided, et cetera, et cetera. There's all sorts of different variations to that, and it really depends on the industry and those sorts of things. Obviously, industry norms are there. It doesn't mean you need to follow them, of course. If you want to do something different, then go for it. Obviously, you just got to be ready for some questions potentially from customers about it. I went to Neville's and they were 30 days from the end of the month, and you're 7 days. So you just got to explain, well, that's what it is, and take it or leave it. So business decision for you, but put some thought into your terms. It's an important part of this process. So if you've got, say, a 7-day account, then as part of that process on, say, the 8th day, you're going to be starting your debt collection process. And the process can even be before the 8th day. For instance, I know a lot of people will send out just a reminder for a couple of days before the 7th day, just to say, great, hope you're well. You've got our invoice. It's due on this day. Just a little reminder, just a few pleasantries. Nothing too major with that one, but it's just to ensure that they've got the invoice, that there's no problems. Then you might kick in on the next day after it was due. And with a formal sort of email or letter. It's simple. The letter, there's nothing much to it in terms of threats or anything like that. It's more just a reminder, just to make sure you've got the invoice. There's no problems. Payments due. Please make payment. We understand things might be missed, etc., etc. So it's quite a pleasant sort of first demand. Then within that policy, you'll also have, and the important thing about this policy is that it is followed, and that you've sort of got one person responsible for this as well. If you have sort of various people throughout the business responsible or doing things along the process, then you could see why things will either get missed or the process just won't be followed. It'll be, oh no, I know Johnny. Don't worry about following him up, those sorts of things. So if you've got a consistent process, then hopefully that goes a long way to making sure that you're collecting as much as possible. And the stats are, if you're following these sorts of processes, then your bad debts are going to reduce. You're going to get more cash in your business. As Jeremy said, cash is king. So the more money you get, the bigger king you are and the better business you're going to have, to make sure that you can pay your debts as well, so you don't have the same process being followed against you by another business, to make sure that you can pay those in a timely manner. So, Jeremy, that's the first slide. Did you put up the second one, the first demand, as well?
Actually, I'd actually already put it up there, Craig. So sorry,
Okay.
but I've already got the first demand one up there. So that's
yeah, so that's the first demand, and as I said, that's the day or very soon after the terms have expired. Then, if you don't get a response to that, then depending on what your policy is, it might be another 7 days after that. You send out a more formal second type demand, and that's where you're, sort of still friends, but getting a bit annoyed. Please make payment immediately, etc., etc. If you don't, then we might be taking further steps, those sorts of things. And with all these, you might get telephone calls back from a debtor, for instance, and that should go to the same person as well following that process. And you've got to, and the whole other reason for that is to take the emotion out of it a little bit as well, that you're not sort of dealing with the person that's doing the actual work. We mentioned that on Monday's Fast Fix as one of the tips, to have someone else involved with it rather than the actual person that's doing the work or selling the goods, because there might be things about, the goods were defective or, those sorts of things. So it's better if someone else is involved rather than the actual person. So it becomes an easier process. And that means that person needs to know about the actual debt, have all the details, etc. Listening to a debtor is obviously always important. So you need to make sure the person that's responsible has got some training and some knowledge in that sort of area. And you want someone that's calm and those sorts of things. And, if they're getting, if there's some, bad words being said, that they can sort of keep calm and deal with it that way. So pretty important to have one person involved, and that's the second demand. As part of our recommended policy, after that, there is a telephone call. And the most important part of making that telephone call is to be prepared for that. So you want to have all your invoices there. You want to be at the computer or some other way of sending invoices, because invariably what happens in this telephone call, if you haven't had any responses to the first and second demand, is, I don't have that invoice. So you want to be able to send it to them straight away and say, Johnny, you in front of your computer now, all right, or have you got your phone? Here, I'm sending you the invoices. And you want to be able to deal with it where you can on that telephone call, because you've got the attention of the person, you're speaking to the person. And depending on your system, you might be able to process a credit card payment over the phone, or some other way of getting payment right there and then, or at least a commitment. And I know a commitment doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be followed through, but if you're getting a commitment, then it might be getting paid the next day. And then it's important to keep notes of all these things. And the one reason for the notes is obviously so you can keep track of what's happening, and so you can do your reports, etc., that you've spoken to Johnny as you're going to pay next week. The other reason is if it does go any further after all this, you've got a trail of you following it up, that there was no disputes raised, that there was an admission of liability, those sorts of things. So if you do go any further, and we won't talk about that too much in this phase, but in the dispute resolution litigation phase, then these sorts of notes potentially can become quite important, because they support your case. So with the phone call, be prepared, have the invoices, have everything there ready to go. Make sure you know about the client. If someone's been dealing with it, maybe touch base with them and say, look, Johnny, I'm calling Johnny today. Have you heard from him? Those sorts of things. Make sure you're ready for the call and any potential questions that might come of it. So it's, again, you've got to have the right person making these sorts of telephone calls. And if you don't think you've got someone in your business able to make these calls, then there are professionals that can help you with that, or make the telephone calls and those sorts of things as a cash flow collection process. So that's something to consider. Jeremy, was there anything else you wanted to add there before I sort of expand a bit more on engaging a professional in this area?
No, I think you've covered everything quite well, Craig. So I'll move on to the engage a professional slide.
Excellent. So, as I was saying with the professional regarding cash flow, they do exist, and if you need the details of someone or are interested in more of that, please get in touch with us via the various platforms, and we can give you the details. And the other way that you'll be potentially engaging a professional is if it's gone too far now, you've done all these things, you've done your demands, you've done your telephone calls, no one's calling you back, no one's paying, etc., then you want to have as part of your team available to you a professional in the debt collection area. So, we're pretty big on having a team of advisors and a team, of people that you can use in your business. And one of those is a debt collection expert, because, again, it's not something that once you get to that point and they haven't paid, then you want to get a professional involved. And the other reason for that is obviously outsourcing this sort of stuff gives you more time to be doing other things and the business to be doing other things. So engage a professional. And again, if you need the details of someone, then please get in contact with us and we can share those with you. And then you can speak to them about engaging a professional. The professional is going to ask you for all the information and all the notes and everything that you've done on the file, which is going to help them, because then when they're contacting the debtor, then they're going to be also saying, well, we've sent you a couple of demands, you haven't responded, Neville spoke to you on such and such a day, you didn't have any problem with it and you were going to pay it, what's the problem, etc., and they'll go through their process of contacting them, sending letters, those sorts of things. And the reason why you want a professional, same as always, because they know everything about what they're doing. And Jeremy will go through the debt collection guidelines shortly. With anything, it's not something that you're just going to do yourself. There are some particular rules in there that Jeremy will expand on more shortly. So you want to have a professional involved, because it's not necessarily an easy process when it gets to that stage. And you want, the best person there trying to get the money in. There are going to be fees associated with engaging a professional, obviously, and you've got to take that as a cost of that side of your business. There are ways, and we've spoken about it previously, with engaging your clients and your terms and conditions. There are ways to help recover as much cost as possible. There might be interest that you could claim, or administration fees, or collection costs, those sorts of things. So important to have those in your terms and conditions if you can. So when you engage as a professional, those sorts of things can also be recovered as part of that process. So I think that's probably it for professional. Jeremy, if you want to touch on anything else, or head straight into the very important debt collection guidelines.
No, I think you've covered everything there. So I'll move into the debt collection guidelines. So the debt collection guidelines are guidelines that have been set down through the federal government. So for anyone who might be listening to this outside Australia, we're talking here about laws that govern debt collection in Australia. Now, I think that in other countries there's probably similar rules, but in Australia, these are the rules that govern debt collection, and they're pretty important to realise that, well, one, that there are rules, because whether you're a creditor or a debtor, there's going to be times when you might need to know that these guidelines exist and know that as a debtor you're protected, and as a creditor there are certain boundaries that you and your debt collector cannot cross. So these guidelines have been around for many years. I'm going to go through and just explain some of the important points so that you know what they are. If you are interested to know more, you can feel free to contact us through our Facebook page or lifecycle@jeremystratton.com, and we'll happily guide you to where they are. We might even actually link the show, the guidelines from the ACCC onto the show notes, so that you can get a copy of them if you need them. And you'll be able to find that at businesslegallifecycle.com.au/044, because this is our 44th show. So as I said, the debt collection guidelines govern basically how debt collection agencies and even creditors who are looking to exercise their rights to recover a debt can deal with their clients. So they are very broad, and there's a bunch of principles and examples that are in there. And if you're not sure about whether it applies, then make sure that you seek legal advice, because different rules apply in different situations, and there's different examples can be interpreted different ways. So you want to make sure that they're practically right. So basically, there are rules about making contact with a debtor. So these are the rules about how often you can contact the people and how and how you actually go about that. So you can't just go trying to contact them for all for any reason. You've got to actually have a debt, and you've got to make sure that you contact them and don't disclose the details. So, for instance, if you're sending an email to a person's work email address, and you need to have a reasonable suspicion that that person's the only person who looks at that email address. Similarly, if you're going to send a letter to someone's house, you need to make sure that you don't disclose information to a debtor's spouse. So you can't just send a letter that isn't addressed to anyone to an address. You've actually got to address it to that person, and usually it's good practice to write private and confidential on there. So you've got to be really careful that when you're making contact with the debtor, that you're making contact with that person. Another good example is a mobile telephone number. So if you've got a mobile telephone number, you've got to make sure that that was actually supplied by the debtor. Because if it's not, and you're contacting them on that number, then it could be someone else's number. It could be their spouse. It could be their child. So you've got to be really careful that you've got a reasonable belief. That's the wording that's used in the debt collection guidelines, that the method that you're using to contact this person is actually going to get in contact with that person. And you also can't misrepresent your identity in any way. And I know that might sound logical, but sometimes some people might think that they're being clever by pretending that they're someone else to get in contact with someone. Say you've got an elusive debtor who is pretending that they can't get in contact with you, and you pretend to be someone else. That's actually illegal. That's misleading and deceptive conduct, and you can actually get into a lot of trouble if you do that. So you've got to make sure that you're upfront with who you are and where you're contacting people, and in that same process, making sure that you're contacting the right person. So the next one is that you can only contact them for reasonable purposes only. So this is all about not contacting them just for any old reason, and making sure that they actually, you've actually got a reason to contact them. So, you don't just want to be harassing people is really the purpose. And that's because, once again, there's been contact made to debtors by overzealous, let's call them overzealous debt collectors who haven't really been reasonable with how they do it. So you can't contact someone 15 times in one day. You've got to contact them at reasonable intervals to make sure that you're actually contacting them right. Contact is quite a broad word, so it can mean communications by phone, communications in writing, and communications in person. So phone is obviously picking up your phone and calling someone. Writing can be email, letter, text message, all those things, and in person, some debt collectors actually come and visit people in their homes. So these contacts, all go together. So it's not just reasonable contact by phone, and then reasonable contact by email, then reasonable contact by text message. It's everything that goes together, and you can't be going together to harass people on multiple times in multiple locations. Next is hours of contact. So there's actually reasonable times that you can contact people, and those are set out. If you're contacting someone by phone, Monday to Fridays, the reasonable contact hours are 7:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. And on weekends is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. This is to stop people from being contacted at all hours of the night. They might be asleep, their phone might be next to their bed, and you don't want to be getting a call at midnight for those people. If you're going to have face-to-face contact, that's Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And also that's on weekends as well. So if you're going to go around and visit someone, the debt collection guidelines say 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. National public holidays. So in Australia, that's things like Australia Day coming up, New Year's Day, Christmas Day. No contact is recommended. That's actually seen as harassment. People are entitled to a day off, even people who haven't paid their bills. So you need to be aware of those things. You also need to be aware of if they're a shift worker, or that they're responsible for the children, caring for a family member, then those hours that I mentioned before may not actually be appropriate. So you need to have a look at their entire circumstances And whilst the first time you contact them might be 8 o'clock at night, by knocking on their door, that could actually change if that's if that person has children, whose children, if you know that they've got young children, and you go knocking on their door at 8 p.m. and that wakes up the children, that could actually be unreasonable contact. So you need to look at all of the circumstances and make sure that what you're contacting the people for is right. Frequency of contact, as I said before, is very important. There's no rules that say that you can't contact someone over so many times, but generally speaking, if you're contacting them more than 3 times per week or more than 10 times a month, then that can be seen as unreasonable. So you need to be really careful that you make sure that you're following those guidelines and that your debt collector is following those guidelines to make sure that you're not be seen as unreasonable. Location of the contact, again, you need to be very careful that it's not unreasonable where you're contacting the person, because you don't want to be falling foul of the rules about being reasonable about contacting them. If they've told you that you're not to contact them at their house, then you've got to respect that and contact them by phone. Face-to-face contact, as I said before, is very problematic. You've got to be very, very careful when you're visiting someone's home that you're not acting unreasonably, because that can obviously feel like intimidation for some people. If you've got a big burly debt collection officer coming back around to someone's house, that can actually be seen as unreasonable contact. So I'm just going through these very quickly. Privacy obligations, obviously I've been through those. You can't disclose someone's personal information. So you can't go ringing someone's employer and saying your employee owes us $5,000 for their telephone bill. That's a breach of the Privacy Act and can actually start involving the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner for a complaint against you for that kind of information. So you need to make sure that who you're contacting is the right person. And look, all of these things I know can stifle some of the debt collection processes, but there are rules in place and we need to follow them, and you need to know what they are. If a debtor is represented by a lawyer or some third party, then you need to respect the fact that that's the case and not go directly to that debtor, and that you contact the representative. Now that's really important because there are rules about lawyers, and as a lawyer I can tell you this, that if I know that someone's represented in any matter, I can't contact them directly without the consent of their lawyer. Well, this goes a little bit further, that if they're represented by a third party, then you need to respect the fact that they are and not contact that debtor directly and just contact their third party. Record keeping. This is really important in the debt collection industry, and I know that a lot of the debt collectors that I've acted for over the years, and the ones that Craig's acted for as well, are really studious in keeping their records really up to date. You need to maintain accurate records. Contemporaneous file notes of conversations that you have with debtors are invaluable, especially if you have to go to court. So we're not talking about litigation today. Litigation's in phase 10. And if you watch next week, we're going to go through our program for 2018, or at least the first part of 2018. And we'll talk about when we're going to talk about litigation. But in litigation, having your records right and records of your conversations with people, your records of your what's been sent out to people are really crucial, because they might have made admissions, and you want to make sure that your records show that, so that if you do have to litigate, that you have good records. They also go helping to show that you haven't been unreasonable with your contact. A lot of people might say that you've been unreasonable in harassing them over time in the debt collection process. So you want to make sure that you have records of when you've tried to contact people. Also, when you come to an agreement for settlement, you want to make sure that you record what the actual terms of that settlement are, because if you don't, then you can, again, if they default and you've just got some verbal agreement, then that can be really problematic. What we recommend is where a settlement is reached, that you contact the debtor by letter, by email, and record those terms of the agreement. Because what you'll find then, if you say you come to an agreement that they're going to pay you over 12 months, and they default on the 10th month, they might say, well, we were just doing that in good faith. There was no agreement because it was a verbal conversation. If you've got that recorded in an email and they've agreed to it by return email, or if they just haven't responded at all, then you've got a record of what the actual agreement is. So make sure that you record everything that you have in your debt collection process. And as Craig said, when you're making phone calls, be in front of the computer and make that contemporaneous note as you're going. It's also required that if they request, if the debtor requests information and documents, that you've got to provide them pretty quickly. So if they request copies of agreements or copies of invoices or copies of statements, make sure that you provide them reasonably quickly. The next one is where a debt is disputed. So if a debt is disputed, and so this might be that if you've had a debt that's been assigned by someone else, or they've told you that the quantum of the debt, so the quantum is the amount of the debt that you're actually fighting over. If you find that that's been disputed, then you need to respect that that's the case and work through with the person to work out why they dispute that debt. So you can see that there's a lot of rules here that cover many different things, and there's actually a lot more, but I'm not going to go through all of them today. If you've got any questions on any of that, then as Craig said, please feel free to contact us. We do this stuff all the time, and we deal with collection agents that deal with this stuff all the time. And if you are interested in more about the rules and guidelines of the ACCC guidelines, and as I say, that will be linked up in our show notes. And we're more than happy to have a chat to you about any of those things. Craig, is there anything that you think, obviously I've gone through a lot of what's in the debt collection guidelines, is there anything in there that I've missed that you think is important?
No, I think, just reiterating that important to follow them. Obviously, you don't want to fall foul of the ACCC. Make sure you've got a professional involved if you're not comfortable in it, and make sure you follow them. The big one is the contact. I think I've seen people come undone with that, not realising what contact might be, or there could be, if it's an email and a telephone call, that potentially could be two contacts. And then you might have too many in the 7-day period. So just making sure you're aware of that is a really important one, I think, about contact and understanding what various contact might be. So that's probably one thing, and I know you mentioned it, but that's probably a really important one that I've seen a lot of people, failing at. But pretty important to read through them, and it's not a short document by any stretch of the imagination, but as Jeremy said, we can give you the details of where it's kept, and you can print it out and give it to the person that's in your team that's going to be responsible for the process. But I think that's it.
You're right, it's not a short document, it's 68 pages, but it's important that you understand them, and you don't need to know them verbatim, but you just need to know that they exist and have it. If you are going through a debt collection process or with a debt collector, you need to be aware of it to make sure that you comply with those rules. So that's it for today's show. As always, if you want to contact us, please either write a comment on Facebook, send us an email. We're contactable in many different ways, as we talk about in all these shows. Craig, did you want to add anything before we wrap up for today?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it. As always, thanks for joining us. We won't be here on Christmas Day, which is on Monday coming. We'll be enjoying some turkey and some family fun, so we'll catch everyone next Wednesday.
Sounds good. See you then, everyone.
All right, bye.